we are witnessing the next revolution. Its name is automation. Its agent is the machine which can think for man and act for man. The servant that is so versatile and so powerful as to become master. Now, suddenly we hear of people disadvantaged and displaced.
There's going to be hundreds of millions of people laid off, people who don't know what kind of jobs to get, don't know what they want, and they're basically going to be relying on things like universal basic income, other government benefits to make up for wages they don't have as they try to fit into a society that frankly doesn't need any of us except on the level of consumers. And it's just kind of creepy. So basically I started this video while trying not to be in the way of my spouse for like the 15th time in the last hour, trying to make some food for the family and look over all my email and social media contacts and get distracted by other side things that are going on while trying to dig into really what's at the heart of the future of work. And I was there at the grocery store when I first saw this, and I realized I wasn't just there for food supplies and resources, but for the last remnants of human contact that are left, essential shopping. And I'm staring at this Time magazine special edition on the future of work. Where do we go from here? And I wouldn't really single them out all that much, but the whole idea behind it is as if they thought up this phrase and as if their own journalistic integrity brought them to this important issue, considering how much this affects everyone, you, me, everyone. I did think it was worth pointing out that this is the very opposite of they just came up with this phrase, the future of work. This is the buzz phrase that has been workshopped and handed down hierarchically. I don't think I need to tell anyone that the World Economic Forum has just been all over these related issues, but they themselves put out a Future of Jobs report for 2020. They have their own Center for the New Economy and Society, and this particular term, the future of work, has become an official buzzword for commissions and studies in various states, California, Massachusetts among them, I think Utah and a few others. And I remember too that it was a topic back in 2018, several years back, before the pandemic, of the very secretive Bill.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong answer.
They were meeting in Turin, Italy, June 7th through 10, and while they were talking about artificial intelligence, the inequality challenge, populism in Europe, free trade, quantum computing, and a weird topic called the post-truth world, they also floated the future of work. And so there in Turin, Italy, where industrialists and titans of Silicon Valley, bankers whose family have been in charge of running various things for generations, amongst all these important politicians and quite a few media people, a lot of editors of major papers, including the Financial Times. Amongst all these people, you have in 2018 Benjamin Pring, the co-founder and director of the Center for the Future of Work, which is another sort of think tank type of thing based in the U.S., and they're all over this issue. So just first of all, it's not like Time magazine conjured up this term to describe what's happening, and they really weren't very transparent about how much that term has been used by other study groups and other sort of steering groups that are helping to shape what's going on, And they're certainly not telling us what's being discussed inside of these secret meetings where they're workshopping these things and bringing them forward. But we do know that the founder of the Center for the Future of Work is hanging out at the secretive Bilderberg Group, Benjamin Pring, and he's in discussions with people from the finance world and the media world, banking, various prime ministers, important political people, a lot of media people, but also the director of UNESCO, the president of the World Economic Forum. Back in 2018, that was Borje Brinde. More recently, it's been Klaus Schwab. They change out the figures, but these types of people are frequently in these discussions, and they're off the record and they're private. And they also include many people involved in economics. There's a Harvard University economic professor. There's a minister of economy, science, and innovation from Canada, a minister for public expenditures and reform out of Ireland, former vice chairman for both the Federal Reserve and the Bank of Israel, a professor of economics from the Netherlands, members of Google and DeepMind and other big Silicon Valley corporations, LinkedIn, Harvard MIT's Ethics and Governance of AI Initiative Director, members of the Council on Foreign Relations, computer science and communications professors, and someone whose title is Professor in the Economics of Innovation and Public Value. Doesn't that just have future of work written all over it? And you got budget and human resources people and other economists mixed in with all these powerful world leaders. And there's a similar sort of cadre of people representative of this idea in the last few years leading up to the pandemic. The last time that the group, already secretive and off the record, the last time they officially had a publicly admitted meeting, which was in 2019. And so they followed up the Future of Work Institute guy with another person called Nick Bostrom, who runs the Future of Humanity Institute over at Oxford. And so these people are openly talking about these very issues. And, like I said, it's tied in with Google, Alphabet, Eric Schmidt, Microsoft, and the people who are trying to roll out universal basic income and a mega technocratic system that's just completely streamlined. Anyway, this Time magazine Future of Work is staring me in the face at the grocery store while I'm not talking to other living human beings, and I'm just standing there blanked out, waiting for my turn to swipe my plastic card and have things rung up by the barcode. While I'm doing that, I keep staring at this magazine. I flipped through it a little. I took some pictures, and for some reason, I just really didn't want to contribute my money to this magazine. I didn't want to bolster their sales or anything. Not that it really matters. So I went on eBay and I got a second-hand copy. So there. But I figured I did need to flip through this. And the propaganda is very typical. It is a lot of propaganda and buzzwords. It's a lot of lip service. They spend a lot of time playing up diverse faces, the issues of various types of minorities in the workplace, and addressing the very real problems of inequity that exist there. They've been problems throughout the development of our time generally, and especially as an agricultural type of society shifted into an industrial and then post-industrial type of society. And you really do have to remember those kinds of transitions as we get into this. But Time magazine breaks down, the challenges and opportunities, what this pandemic has done to us, and how the age of technology has changed things. And of course, wasn't it just so fortuitous that when everyone had to stay home because they might get the that technology was there to hold us. They had our backs, right? The internet had grown full enough that this pandemic, it was in their hands, wasn't it? You better believe it, okay? And this is all about who's going to be the intermediary on what we know as reality, because it's a post-truth world.
So in a way, you're making an argument for our technology companies to become even more involved, and even that they will become even more needed going forward if we're going to move towards much more information technology, information sharing.
And so let's be a little bit grateful that these companies got the capital, did the investment, built the tools that we're using now, and have really helped us out. Imagine having the same reality of this pandemic without those tools.
Where's reality? Can you reach out and grab it? You better grab what you can. You look through this, and they're talking about changes in the air. No shit. The way companies structure things is going to be different in a post-pandemic world. You don't think? It's time to radically rethink how we work. There's the issue of hourly workers demanding better pay and benefits. The challenges and opportunities. We're not going back to the past. It's the issue of people not feeling fulfilled from their jobs. And this one, lovely wording. The pandemic revealed how much we hate our jobs. Now there's the obvious answer of the year award.
Like they didn't know that decades ago. They didn't know that, really.
They've known for a long time how little rewarding it is for people to put in their labor, especially hourly wages and a lot of low-paying service jobs. But then again, the white-collar corporate world, equally unfulfilling, largely pointless, and it's just a lot of paper pushing, and we're going to get into the reasons why. Then they get into the age of technology. Will remote work actually work for us? Can companies embrace empathy and how work might improve under this model? Well, I mean, it really is hitting on a lot of real issues, okay? You can't expect human beings to barely get by on hourly wages and be treated like crap by everyone they interact with. You know, obviously that's going to be a problem. The mass unemployment and layoffs was in the first wave of what happened, and then there was the mass resignations and quitting, and this is just all tied in with the technological plan here. The crisis that begs for a response, the crisis that looks for the fulfillment of a pre-hatched plan, the type of crisis that forces attention onto the path that somebody wants, emerged, okay? And we all know what happened. They closed things. They told people to stay indoors, to social distance. And even now, more than 2 years into it, so much mental energy of everyone that I know, I'm sure that you do, is just completely focused on the danger of its...
I'm sorry.
What are they hiding? What are they not telling us? The issues between, effectiveness, very real issues, and the very real issues of civil liberties and a digital authorization, a pass for access to businesses, to travel, to the world out there. But these are really just caveats and pieces of the larger issue that they really want to interrupt. They use that word disrupt a lot. They want to disrupt normal human society. The pandemic started it, and they intend to continue it. They make it very clear in these writings. And I was kind of going back and forth between the Great Reset and a couple of documents I found online. It's all kind of an intertwined issue. But this idea comes up that there has been a dual disruption, right? In the longer trend, automation and technology has been hounding at us ever since the start of the Industrial Revolution.
Period between 1750 AD and today. This we call the Industrial Revolution.
Which, I don't know if you realize, was at the exact same time that the American Revolution started.
Whether or not the hour has come to break with the mother country. To some, like Tom Paine,
everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. 'Tis time to part.
That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary.
Now, with Thomas Jefferson's words, the die is cast.
I think the key sort of turning point with factories and automated looming machines and that sort of thing really started very close to the Revolution. The Watt steam engine, the Bolton, those guys were part of the Enlightenment. It was hand in hand.
Next, the power of steam, which had been known for centuries, this time in the first practical steam engine. Textile production in England expanded further. The factory whistle awakened people in the mornings and measured off their long days of toil. Along the Atlantic seaboard, the English factories and machines were quickly copied, by the alert Americans. In the South, cotton long had been raised, and there was an abundance of slave labor. But one slave could separate only about a pound of staple from seed per day. The saw teeth of Eli Whitney's cotton gin could separate from 50 to 100 pounds per day.
It didn't really catch up with people until the latter 1800s.
Cotton became king. The spinning and weaving mills of the Northeast were multiplied and enlarged. Thousands of added workers went into the textile mills.
When things really became mechanized, industrialized, factories, machine work.
Next, there came a great surge of invention. In a single decade, from 1840 to 1850, 6,000 patents were granted, the most important being the telegraph and the sewing machine.
And more people moved away from farms. They broke the agriculture system in America. Slaves were no longer in bondage, but they were sent into big cities to work in the machines, and it's a trade-off. Life is never without problems. Some things got better, some things didn't.
It is the height of bitter irony that the Negro people of our country should begin their strongest, most united demand for job rights, among other rights, at the very time that the door to employment appears to be closing in so many places. The pressure mounts. More jobs, better jobs, now.
Moving forward, they reached a point with the technology, and we did cover this in The Minds of Men. It's very much part of cybernetics and the technological revolution that happened with mind control research. Known during the first 6 meetings by the longer title, Circular Causal and Feedback Mechanisms in Biological and Social Systems. These cybernetic conferences combine the innovators of the physical and biological sciences with those of the psychological and social sciences to tackle the, quote, comprehensive study of man. And it's the problem of the third and fourth industrial revolutions. They say we're on the fourth industrial revolution now, which is post-industrial, and around the World War II time period came, I think, what was considered the third industrial revolution, where really a type of scientific management, operations research was one of the key words, a study of the data and a cataloging of what's most efficient and effective in terms of management coincided with the rise of technology's ability to do things on humans' behalf and do it more efficiently and faster, and communications itself is a huge part of that.
A psychologist was involved in this experiment, along with a biophysicist and a physiologist.
This was the birth of personal computers, robotics, satellites, and artificial intelligence. From the very beginning, models created in the digital computer of the brain were also inversely symbolic of the mechanization of the mind, which might one day be conquered one neuron at a time. And basically, by the time the bomb drops and ends World War II, automation is completely a foregone conclusion. Norbert Wiener talked about it explicitly in the late 40s, just a couple years after the end of World War II, and he was working on that stuff. He was part of the war effort on the science and research side, and he begins to talk to management societies about the degree to which automation is now a foregone conclusion. Speech about everything that his technology can do and how easy it is to replace human action, to program what people do, and to use the computers and the machinery to do it for them. And in 1951, he starts talking partway through the speech about the elimination of the human being in the process entirely. He says this elimination obviously could lead to great unemployment. We have a very interesting situation here with catastrophic possibilities. What we have is the possibility of a second industrial revolution. He says, I'm not only talking of overall labor, I'm talking about white-collar labor too, and really cutting into the economic backbone of ordinary people. And this is in 1950. He already knows that these machines are not limited by relatively simple matters, that they're going to get more and more sophisticated, and that there's really very little that regular people can do that machines can't do in replacing them. most everything that we're doing is replaceable. So what does that mean for jobs? He's actually warning the managers in 1951 that they've got to control the implementation of this. He says we have to adjust ourselves socially to it. Mind you, we can adjust. The adjustment will not come automatically. I mean that we cannot deprive people of jobs and still value them in terms of the amount they can earn on such jobs. And management knows that automation is here and it's just a question of implementation.
My personal opinion is that the world will organize into things that humans are good at and computers are good at. Now, what are humans good at?
The most important conversation happened in the lunchroom when Arturo Rosenbluth told the other attendees about his work with math genius Norbert Wiener on so-called teleology and goal-seeking devices. As it turned out, the behavior of organisms and machines could be neatly and simply modeled around the feedback loop. Margaret Mead was so riveted that she chipped a tooth. She said, recalling the meeting, it was 1942.
When you really had the design of what needed to be done.
And starting around that time, Norbert Wiener starts this kind of talk of, what are we going to do with the leisure of people? We have this new problem, not of employment, but of leisure.
Has MRAC been helping you any?
Well, frankly, it hasn't started to give yet. For the past 2 weeks, we've just been feeding it information. But I think you could safely say that it will provide more leisure for more people.
We have to find ways for people to occupy themselves and still fill a certain type of fulfillment and still experience enough fulfillment to remain human and remain functional, but also be sort of satiated as their actual labor is needed less, but their consumption is still needed and their standard of living is still needed.
There is always a place for the man who can earn his pay. This is basic to our thinking. The trouble is that in many places the machine is moving up alongside the man to compete with him instead of serving him. How can production grow while jobs go down? The answer lies in the machine, in automation, in greater efficiency per man hour. There are more and more places where you can't beat the machine for efficiency and earning power, as more and more men are learning to their sorrow.
So it's a big problem, and the reason I don't think that we saw more from management with automation that early on in 1950 is not just because some of it takes time to develop and implement, and just because the idea of automation is there, it's not the same as having each task that's manufactured up to speed, but also it was really just a management problem of implementing on the human side. How many of these corporate jobs, like I said, have been paper pushing around, glorified reasons for people to get up in the morning? I mean, these white collar jobs, I mean, probably most of you have seen like the Office Space movie. The image of these corporate jobs sitting around terminals and water coolers and coffee rooms, a lot of that work has always been pointless, you know? It's just occupying people in the larger transition phase, which has taken several generations.
I think work is pretty much what society says it is at any given point in time, and I think it's essentially a matter of how society wants to define it. And I accept the Freudian notion that man's tie with reality is through work, and that work is essential if you're going to have a stable society, so that I would not want to eliminate it. But I do think we're going to have to redefine it. I may have to call things work that in the past have been thought of as leisure or luxury or fun or play. Perhaps we might even create a happier generation in this way, I'm not sure.
And we know that our biggest problem is that we're all victims of habit. And because someone has been accustomed to working 8 hours, or because the executive occasionally puts in some extra time, he can't understand why his workers shouldn't still continue to work 8 hours at a time when it's no longer necessary. It's hard to understand that it's no longer necessary to have everybody working 8 hours or more.
At any rate, obviously a lot's happened since World War II to bring us to this point. and now's not really the time to recap all that. But getting back to the pandemic times, the development of technology and artificial intelligence in particular, in combination with COVID, has created what these people, these future of work buzzword people, are considering a dual disruption. The effects of COVID, they say, accelerated the technological displacement of work. It accelerated what was happening with artificial intelligence. It accelerated the automation, the replacement of human labor altogether across virtually every field.
A new kind of revolution is beginning to occur around the world, not here alone. And as is usual with this kind of a social revolution, in the past, the events have always overtaken us. And my only purpose now is to call enough attention to what's going on.
Okay, so what they're revealing with this language is it's not so much about the pandemic and its diseases. That's not really the story. It's about the acceleration of something that was already planned and already unfolding that now has happened suddenly and taken a pivotal turn overnight. And you've got to begin to recognize and separate the distraction for what it is from the larger issue. Yes, there are very real important issues surrounding the story of a pandemic and its disease and solutions, but that itself is just one of the roads into this larger story of technological replacement and automation, which I know you all know quite a bit about.
They come in empty and the machine takes over. It's almost as if the machine gives them life, turns them into symbols of ourselves, queuing up for the future, moved by forces beyond our control, getting on board for a destination that remains vague. The men who watch the machine tell us something about modern work. Well, that's mostly what they do, watch. And yet they are highly skilled men. Each one understands the operation from start to finish, knows where to look for signs of trouble, what to do when the machine goes wrong. Mostly they watch the machine with what might be called an engaged detachment.
And it showed up in all these movies, and it's a major theme in our dystopic stories and culture all around. We've been warning each other, and we've also spooked ourselves out with stylized ghost stories of this world to come, this blend of Brave New World in 1984 mixed with high-tech computery type stuff. Of all of them, I think Michael Crichton's Westworld and the sequel Future World really come to mind, and it was a very cheesy movie, I thought, especially the sequel Future World, but it was also very on point. They started with the idea that there's a getaway, there's a fantasy Disney world of the future where technology can let you live out all your fears and desires and the fantasies of what it was like in the past. You can make it with a robot or have a shootout with a guy from the Old West, or you could play chess in a lifelike augmented reality superset straight out of Alice in Wonderland. And it gives people something to do, and those machines went awry, the few actor machines that stood in for those fantasies. But in the second part of the story, the sequel, what they get up to is that really that technology of automation, these robots, these artificial intelligence robots, aren't just a fantasy pleasure device. They're not a vehicle for transporting you to your fantasies of various sorts. They are a vehicle for replacing humanity itself. And in the plot of this movie, they start from the top down and start inviting in and replacing one for one influential and powerful, rich, celebrated people from society and replacing them with look-alike robots that are programmable and that fit in with the world they're building. That's the sort of thing we're talking about. And as they get us to stay home from work and yield to the pandemic and give in to this fear of intimacy, this fear of human contact, and this view that humanity itself and each other are a problem to ourselves, they're very much creating new problems, obviously.
We've all been trained, and our courts are geared to it, and our thinking is geared to property value. How long is it going to take until we get around to human value? gave a serious thought to human value, as we do to property value. I'll give you an illustration of that. If on 3rd Avenue tonight some fellow breaks a window, he'll get arrested and he'll either he'll be brought to court and he'll either be fined or he'll be sent away for breaking that window. But some company can sit down and shut down a plant which will destroy a whole town. Now, we must ask ourselves, who's done the most damage in the community? The fellow who broke the window? Or the people who have shut down a plant which destroyed a whole town?
It really reaches a point of isolation. Well, the effect, anyway, is going to be isolation. They keep telling us the goal is connectivity and networked around the world. Get on social media where you have no one in the room with you. You're responding to memes with emojis from your toilet, where you're sending messages to people you kind of know. Maybe a few of them actually have become real friends of yours, but most of them are just on your populated network tree of people you kind of know, you kind of have something in common with, but you're not really connecting with. And this is great for a future that's going to be dominated by corporations, where corporations themselves become the monarchs and the leaders of our society.
But here is truly the most wonderful and exciting thing I've ever had the chance to talk about. It's the Westinghouse Total Electric Home. A home where electricity does everything. Heats, cools, illuminates, launders, preserves and prepares foods, entertains. It even lights a path to the front door with rayescent strip lighting. When you step inside the Total Electric Home, you step into an entirely new concept in living, organized around electric centers, such as this entertainment center. Electric heating and cooling keep the home constantly and automatically at the most livable temperatures all year round. Sterile lamps kill airborne bacteria, while electrostatic filters remove pollen and dust.
This is great for a future where corporations do not need our human labor, but they need our eyeballs, and they need our attention, and they need our inherent fears and desires. You know, a lot of this is Edward Bernay's propaganda PR 101, right? The Century of the Self was the definitive documentary on it. Very eye-opening if you haven't seen it.
This episode is about Freud's American nephew, Edward Bernays. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
A lot of it is what Sean Parker and other Facebook and Silicon Valley titans have said about their own technology. Their goal was to keep you engaged for as long as possible.
When Facebook was getting going, I had these people who would come up to me and they would say, you know, I'm not on social media. And I would say, okay, you know, you will be. And then they would say, no, I value my real life interactions. I value the moment. I value presence, and I value intimacy. And like, I don't know if I really understood the consequences of what I was saying. It literally changes your relationship with society, with each other. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains.
Does it matter if it's a bad response or a positive response? No, they don't care. They want your engagement.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever.
The founders of the great Silicon Valley spying empires like Facebook have publicly declared that they intentionally included addictive schemes in their designs.
It's a social validation feedback loop because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
And they found out that if engagement is the goal, they can get more engagement out of negative, provocative, hate-filled responses than they can from get along, good Sally, friendly responses, right?
So the algorithms naturally catch the negativity and amplify it and introduce negative people to each other and all of this. When researchers try to determine whether positivity or negativity is more powerful, they're roughly at parity. They're both important. But the difference with social media is that the algorithms, they're looking for the quick responses, and the negative responses, like getting startled or scared or irritated or angry, tend to rise faster than the positive responses, like building trust or feeling good.
Jared Lanier, who was part of the whole project of telecommunications nationwide, at the turn of the century, he said that in an interview. So Sean Parker, Jared Lanier, and Pali Apatia, these kind of people.
I feel tremendous guilt. I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created, and it is a point in time where people need to hard break from some of these tools.
Have warned and sort of invited us into the boiling frog water of what's really going on. These social media companies really want to isolate us and harvest our engagement, for lack of a better word.
It's made people jittery and cranky. It's made teens especially depressed. And because it's so algorithmic, it doesn't involve direct communication, and people don't get the cues to understand what's happening with them.
My solution is I just don't use these tools anymore. I haven't for years. And it's weird. I guess I kind of just innately didn't want to get programmed. And so I just tuned it out. But I didn't confront it. And now to see what's happening, it really bums me out.
So they need us as consumers up to a point. They really don't need our human labor and work anymore. Not really. Yes, they need influencers. Yes, they'll keep a certain level of jobs around for stability, but things are changing really rapidly. And we've reached a point where they have patents on how you can earn crypto in the physiology calculus of your body while you're watching ads on a Microsoft platform, just for instance. And they have plans for children to make crypto money while they're playing video games. Okay, maybe it's cool for kids to make some money on the side, but what they're really learning is to entrain themselves and behaviorize themselves into greater and greater consumer passive engagement with these, quote, social media platforms, with these immersive metaverse quasi-worlds, right? And so what is a corporation, a new monarchy? What do they really want from their citizens? They want them to be a captive audience. They want them to be readily receptive to everything they want them to consume and deprived of everything that would compete with that. And that really is, namely, human contact and socialization in the world that we've known up to now.
As the men do their hard, heavy, old-fashioned work, they look over their shoulder at the mechanized movement of cargo. Not many men are needed for this. Not many pairs of hands.
The decision to automate, therefore, is forced upon us.
We must separate pay from work. The combination of the power of the machine and the skill of the machine creates a situation where we now know, no matter what we do, we will never again put all Americans who are capable of work back to work.
And these pockets of unemployment, permanent unemployment, are beginning to appear around the country.
even if you're out and about and you're interacting with people that aren't really your favorite or they're okay, there's something inherently important that's developed out of the way that species have developed on this planet, the way that human behavior has built up, but a lot of animal behavior too, on an importance around socialization. There's something inherently important in our brains and our mental health with eye contact, handshakes.
I could have told you that.
Being at a social circle, working together in some capacity in our tribes and our societies and our groups, our communities, whatever you want to call them, by imitating that online and inviting people into quasi versions of that, they're hoping to placate people enough to substitute those needs while at the same time creating a certain atmosphere of lack out of desperation for that kind of human contact, and then selling people on a false engagement of that type of contact. They mention in Time Magazine they've got Zoom and Apple FaceTime and everything that they've been doing corporate meetings on, but you really can't look into the computer and look into someone's eye at the same time. You can look at their face on the screen, or you can look into the camera, and if you look into the camera, you have a little bit better eye contact, but you can't really see the other person. Or if you look at the other person, you're not really making camera eye contact with them. And they know that's a problem, so they have patch apps that correct for your lack of attention, that fake your eye contact with the person on the other end to give a false impression that you're really making some sort of eye contact and therefore some sort of human contact between you, because there's just something about it. And they know they have a problem with that.
Any real man knows a firm handshake, a look in the eye, that's basic respect.
And they know that the lack of touch creates a real dearth in what it means to be human. And this is very much a crossroads into the world of transhumanism. Somewhere beyond this are a species of human-like people that aren't human anymore. And if they don't have enough emotional maturity, enough empathy, enough interaction with each other, these humans of the near future, or of an alternate world, hopefully it can be turned around and averted, they're a very impoverished type of human. If they're still human at all, they're humans who will be very lacking in all types of emotion and neurochemicals associated with the physical and social contact in this world. And it hasn't shown to be very healthy in a physical, physiological, and mental health type of way for people. They already know that.
Dr. Hebb discovered a clear threshold at which a man's mind, any mind, would break down within a matter of days. Many participants hallucinated within just 48 hours.
Those who stuck it out began to see things, hear things.
Some felt their heads had become disconnected from their body. Others felt they had two bodies. One claimed he saw purposeful squirrels marching with sacks over their shoulders, while another claimed he'd been attacked by pellets fired from a miniature rocket ship. Hebb and his researchers concluded a changing sensory environment seems essential for human beings, noting that without it, a major breakdown in thought processes akin to a psychotic break could be quickly achieved in just a few simple, inexpensive steps.
That's why the worst punishment in prison is to be put in the stripy hole and isolated from everyone, and even 24 or 48 hours at that point, and when they cut you off from light and everything, it could be extremely detrimental to the human psyche. And in a prolonged sense, it leads to early death. They've done all these studies, they have the statistics, and they've shown that a certain level of isolation, it causes the hypothalamus to shrink, and various types of important internal fluids are deprived, not flowing where they're supposed to, and a part of the self sort of shrivels up from that, and it leads to an early death. It is worse than chain smoking. Right? They've got statistics on that. People die statistically 15 years earlier from that. There's a range of, I'm not that social of a person compared with some people for sure, but I still appreciate some social interaction. And I've really been feeling the loneliness and deprivation of that these last couple of years especially, and working from home generally for about a decade now. I've noticed, okay? And instead, they want us kind of cooped up so we can't wait to escape this world and interact with their fake play worlds while we've all agreed to our own isolation. What do they need laws and punishments and crimes and police officers for if they can get everyone to isolate themselves and deprive themselves of something in life,
That if you deprive someone of their senses for long enough, they will become totally disoriented in time and space and in their entire thought process. Without external stimuli, one is left in a closed circuit. Thoughts will go round and round and round in an endless loop. When the information is fed back in, and it's the only information available, what else could be the result? But that even nonsense would be a logical conclusion. When isolation is used as a weapon, Dr. Felix made clear, anyone could be broken down by this technique.
When you look into the rationales and the writing here in the Time magazine and the Great Reset and these other comparable publications and all these public statements, it becomes pretty clear that the climate crisis also becomes a pretext for the acceleration of automation. And once again, whereas there's, of course, very real environmental issues, the real driving factor of the limitations surrounding climate crisis when it comes to human action is really based on keeping people at home, introducing digital intermediaries, cutting down on the lifestyle of things, and putting people into the digital representation. And the end result of that is isolation from human contact, removing all of us, theoretically, from society. And South Korea has taken this to the extremes. They were just in the news for aiming to cut human interaction and begin building a, quote, untact society. No human contact. And they're going to invest heavily in removing layers of human contact. And among other things, they plan to build their own metaverse for the capital city in Seoul and build a digital government with avatar representatives, not real representatives, no one you could redress grievances with. Well, I mean, technically you can file complaints and you can pay your bills and your taxes and what have you. And since they don't want people congregating, you can also go to their famous festivals in the metaverse. Fine, interesting idea. But the way they make it seem is as if it's going to be solidly built into place within about 5 years. They're introducing it now, they're building it up, but they make it sound like they intend for it to be complete, as if everyone would be required or at least heavily encouraged to operate within that system within just a few short years. There's sort of a cute overlay to this, as if the world is going to become an Animal Crossing wherever you are, and you're going to go walk up to your little digital mayor and pay your little pittance tax and everything. But underneath that is a system that not only transfers all the power to Silicon Valley and other makers of the technology, but it literally dehumanizes people. It doesn't just give business to monopolies. This isn't just about money. This is about some very strange human engineering, and where does it end? It's fine to have a machine deliver fast food to you and not have menial workers flipping burgers and scooping fries, but when that's the end-all be-all and there's no human to talk to about your issues, if the computer doesn't recognize your problem or doesn't understand your question or doesn't have an answer for that, who are you going to ask? Maybe the metaverse is going to be very interesting. I'm not trying to take away the merits of a system like this, potentially. And again, it could be very cute. Have all your favorite celebrities in their avatar form, and you could meet them, allegedly, or whatever. But, I don't know, it feels like a trap. They write, Untact has made many aspects of life so convenient. I reserve my library books online, which would then be sanitized in a book sterilizer before being delivered to a locker for pickup. Because, again, I made this point before, books are the number one transmitters of diseases between people. It's very scary what you could pick up from reading a book, whenever. Introduced in 2020, Untact is a South Korean government policy that aims to spur economic growth by removing layers of human interaction from society. It gathered pace during the pandemic, but they're by no means done with the pandemic. It's expanding rapidly across the sectors of healthcare, business, entertainment, and again, government already has been taken into account, all of it. The push to create contactless services is designed to increase productivity, cut bureaucracy, but it's also fueled concerns about potential consequences. A sociological professor says that while there are advantages, it also threatens social solidarity and may end up isolating individuals. Gee, you think? If more people lose the feeling of contact during the lack of face-to-face interaction, society will encounter a fundamental crisis. I really think that is true. There's a lot of truth to it. I think there's some really big issues there. Civil services are getting a facelift under the Untact policies as well. Seoul City plans to build a, quote, metaverse, a virtual space where users can interact with digital representatives of people and objects, avatars of public officials who will resolve complaints. So if you thought they were puppets in empty suits before in government, now it's literally going to be avatars that are just images of public officials. Who knows if they're even elected representatives anymore. And instead of talking to the real people you can never get through to, you can have like a chat bot with the face of the government official answer your questions. So that'll finally feel like democracy at last. Am I right? I mean, the empty big suits working for the corporations now will literally just be avatars of cute, respectable officials who look like authorities, and underneath it, they're really just low-grade AI. Maybe they always are government. Several local governments have launched AI call bots to monitor the health of those self-isolating. They also talked about a robot that'll chew you out if you're not wearing a mask while it sterilizes everything. I just think it's crazy. Sociologist Choi Young-rul says Untact provided some advantages, allowing anonymity through electronic devices, freeing people from the pressures of formality, reducing emotional labor associated with the service industry, the latter problem being acute, where customer service is highly valued, hierarchical structures persist, and abusive behavior by those in positions of power, known as gabjil, is commonplace. But feelings of loneliness and social fragmentation remain. And those are going to be some of the biggest trends, really. Loneliness and isolation are just plain out going to be some of the biggest issues.
Some unions in heavy industry demand what is called loneliness pay, an extra percentage like flight pay, to be given workers who spend their whole working life removed from human contact, relating to a machine.
So with something like 1 billion people who are going to need to be re-skilled in the next 5 to 10 years, many of whom lost their jobs instantly during the pandemic, or now as layers of technology take over their jobs, there's going to be hundreds of millions of people laid off, people who don't know what kind of jobs to get, don't know what they want, and they're basically going to be relying on things like universal basic income, other government benefits to make up for wages they don't have as they try to fit into a society that frankly doesn't need any of us except on the level of consumers. And it's just kind of creepy. And there's an app for that. There'll be an app for everything. We'll be networked and connected to death. AI will be in charge of almost everything. Telecommuting will be the way to go. You know, they're going to have these holographic speakers at presentations. And obviously, you already know they plan to clamp down on travel. People will be in their homes playing and watching things and making NFTs, I guess. And that's fine or whatever. But we have already seen that they're not going to tolerate free speech This is going to be a very controlled and monitored system where a keyword given to AI is going to shut down everything you've worked for. Maybe you're criticizing the subject of the keyword, and the AI doesn't know that because you just mentioned the keyword. So now you can't even call out something that is bad. The authorization and validation tech has already been forced on us, and quite clearly they intend for that to expand. So, Time magazine said on page 77, quote, "People evolve to shake hands and gather together, even when doing so spreads disease, so there must be something beneficial to it." Yeah, there's something about the natural world. We're social creatures by nature, they always say. And there's something about the interaction, the energy between people, what happens through eye contact, shaking of hands, hugging when it's appropriate, these kind of things. They could try to replicate them in the metaverse, online, in the digital environment, but it just isn't the same. There's a physiological thing that happens for our health and sanity, you know, and there's also just something legitimate about it, something authentic. And that's going to be really hard to reproduce, and I don't even really want to see them succeed in reproducing it. I just want what's authentic and natural and beneficial to remain. So I guess I'm doomed to be a relic of the past. But you could see, just with the pandemic and the climate crisis as buzzwords and operative topics, you know, that they're perfectly willing to sacrifice what's human for the environment, for the greater good, and for any of these other interrelated reasons. But really, underlying it, when you look at the analysis, the coming wave of automation and the benefit that offers to corporations who basically just want to exploit people and don't want them to be fulfilled and have the basics that they need from human interaction. It allows them to exploit through this wave of automation all kinds of things, an app for everything, a way to stay connected to people, a way to make it look like you're looking at people for real in the 3D world, like you're making real eye contact, because it'd be too hard just to get people together in a room and let them have that, because they could spread disease through shaking hands. You've heard all this kind of talk, but frankly, I think they know better. They've groomed these topics, these pet words. They've loaded them with meaning. They've saddled it with decades of propaganda, or years in the case of this pandemic, and they've conditioned people not to know what's even for their own good. They've conditioned people to shame people for trying to live the old ways or just try to maintain what humanity's left. You know, they can make all the avatars and holographs they want, but I think the next real pandemic is one of human loneliness and isolation. And I think it stands to be extremely bad for mental health, very bad for the physical health of the body, the physiological health. It's very clear from the science what the benefits are: to shake hands, to touch, to hug, to be held by your mother. I really pity those people who didn't have nurturing parents, you know, but for them to try to cut it out for everyone, to try to take that layer away and put on a happy layer of, you know, the digital mother, the digital mayor, your digital friends, I don't see how it could ever be fulfilling. And it could be literally very harmful for millions and billions of people. And if they really follow through with all this and take it to its extremes, there will definitely be consequences for human health. No doubt about it.
So I'm in an obsolete a job that doesn't exist anymore, because now they've got new things, I think, called monitor boards.
This is the last straw. In my opinion, anyway, this is the end of the road. After this, there is no place else.